Thank you so much.
Exposed to this stuff.
Oh, well, thank you, Rolando. That's fabulous. I see that we even have some students already submitting questions to the question and answer panel. So that is perfect. I will do my best to answer those in the end. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started then, okay?
Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining everybody today. We appreciate you. Today, we're talking about visas beyond Stanford, visas beyond the farm. And I'm really excited to be here with you today. Just a reminder, when you do put questions in the Q&A panel, you should have the option in Zoom to select anonymous, but if you don't put anonymous, we can see your names. So this is not confidential. This is not legal advice. This is educational. Please speak to an individual immigration lawyer for a one-on-one consultation if you do need legal advice. So our mission at Alcorn Immigration Law is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, cutting-edge, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. So wherever you're from, if you want to live and work legally in the United States, we have got you covered. A little bit about my background. I wanted to make my bio a little bit more interesting with some memories of my time on the farm. I was an international relations major. I graduated in 2005. I really loved studying abroad in Moscow and Florence at the Stanford centers there as an undergrad. I loved studying my Italian verb conjugations in the Rodin Sculpture Garden by the Cantor Arts Museum, and had a blast spending my senior year in Casa Italiana. So super excited whenever I have a chance to speak to Stanford students in the community.
There's a lot of Italian there, so I know you understand non c'è carta igienica in bagno. Toilet paper in the bathroom, but hey.
It's good to know a little
bit. But we're still in a pandemic, you know. Anyway.
I've been dreaming of going back to Italy. I started out as a German major and then got so obsessed with traveling in Moscow and Italy and that I needed another major to graduate on time. So I chose international relations.
Very good about that, by the way. You're going to meet students today that have more than one major. It's not uncommon. Or to go co-term. They're undergrads with a master's. It's very, very common nowadays. So
that's incredible. It's so inspiring whenever I get to meet Stanford students and learn what everybody's up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm local. I live in Mountain View. Our firm is in Mountain View, and founded my immigration law firm here in Silicon Valley to start technology founders and startups and people really to be able to live their dreams in the United States. You mentioned the TechCrunch column, so that's weekly. There's the podcast. All of those links we'll make available for you.
Yeah, I tell students that I've been here quite a while, and I've gotten to meet a lot of good students, and I think I know at least 5 students who became billionaires with a B. And then there's others that aren't as well off. Michael Krieger is one of them. You have the app Instagram in your phone?
Oh, I've heard of that. I'm not obsessed with it.
He was a first student who created that. I used to get 2-page emails from him. But
wow,
you're connected to Silicon Valley, you know.
We're connected to the world here, and Stanford is really helping to shape the world. And the students on this webinar today are going to do things that will change the course of world history, I'm sure. Yeah. So just a little bit more about us before we dive in. This is our team. We're from all over the world. For us, immigration is very personal. I hire people that either are immigrants or children of immigrants, people married to immigrants. So this is all extremely important to us for one reason or another. And Stanford is here in the Our Network slide, first and foremost, near and dear to my heart. And also, you know, I'm a mentor at 500 Startups. I'm part of Founders Network. I have the TechCrunch column. So to the extent we can, we're excited to leverage these relationships and our VC connections for any of our clients. So since there's a bunch of founders, aspiring founders on the call, please keep that in mind. And here are my fun Stanford memory photos. My graduation speech, 2005, that was actually the one with Steve Jobs. which was
That was a
super inspiring. It was an
Yeah.
amazing event. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had the beach ball on my head for the wacky walk.
Yeah.
Sometimes. All right. So some immigration context to get us started. And I do have a ton of slides. So I'm kind of going to go through these at some kind of lightning speed. I know you guys are really fast. You're probably all advanced immigration practitioners for your own lives. So this is going to be a high level, rapid, lots of information, and I'll try to leave time for as many questions as possible at the end. Okay, so typical path, you're probably all here on visas, F1 or J1. You might want a green card one day to have permanent residence in the United States. And maybe some of you want to become citizens one day to have the right to vote or bring your parents over with green cards from another country. If you ever leave the United States and go back to your home countries, let's say you no longer have an F1 visa, it is possible to apply for a green card from your home country by yourself, or if your parents want green cards, right? You don't have to have a visa to get a green card. So that is what I want to impart to you with this slide, and we'll talk more about visa and green card options coming up. So as you know from all the support you get from Bechtel, the F1 student visa journey is rich and full of adventure and excitement. Some of you might qualify if Stanford offers it for curricular practical training during your degree programs. When you graduate, you can work with Bechtel to get I-20s for regular OPT, or if you're a STEM major, STEM OPT for the 2-year extension. Stanford's MBA program led the way with getting their MBA STEM qualified before that was a thing. But the many master's and MBA programs around the country have since followed, which is really exciting for business students.
Had to change.
Yeah,
it did, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great.
If you're not in a STEM major and you have time to change your major, you might want to consider picking a STEM major or a STEM double major, because that gets you 2 more years to live and work in the United States. And if you want to be a founder, you can be a founder on F1 OPT. You can be an independent contractor, you can volunteer as long as it's related to your field of study. For STEM OPT, there are more specific requirements that you have to make sure your startup would meet in order to request the I-20 from Bechtel to authorize STEM OPT. So, depending on your company, the role, your equity, who's going to teach you and train you, who's going to supervise you, there are ways that we found to set up STEM OPT for founders.
That's a hot topic.
Startups. Okay.
And even though the immigration rules or immigration originally said you can't be self-employed if you're doing a STEM extension, but if you have that mentor relationship.
Yeah, and we can work with corporate counsel to set up the equity, the voting rights, to ensure that there's an employer-employee relationship within the company as well.
That's, I think, where students might have questions in the future.
Okay, great, wonderful. Now, the typical corporate America U.S. immigration journey is you get a job at a big tech company, maybe as a software engineer, and you hope and pray that they'll be gracious enough to put you in the H-1B lottery every year, and that they'll sponsor you one day for a green card through EB-2 or EB-3 with a perm. So that can take a very long time. So we're also going to talk about options to empower you to be self-employed, be entrepreneurs, go on your own independent path, and not have to necessarily just go for the standard option.
Sophie, when you use the word perm, can you clarify that?
Perm? Thank you. Yes, perm is part of the green card process when an employer sponsors you for a work-based green card. It's the first step. It's a labor certification. The perm is the acronym that they have for the electronic process. And essentially, the company has to recruit US workers to replace you, and only if they can't find a replacement for you are they allowed to sponsor your green card. So we'll be talking about green card options that allow you to bypass that whole process, which can save you time and reduce the risk. Now, I know there's also probably lots of J1 holders on this call. I know that Stanford brings many exchange visitors to the United States. So something that you all need to know about yourself if you're on J1 is, do you have to go back to your home country for 2 years after your J1 program ends? That's something called the 212E foreign residence requirement. So you need to look in two places. One is on your DS 2019 paperwork that Stanford generated and that the consulate may have signed to see if it says that you are or are not subject. You also need to check the actual visa foil placed in your passport to see what it says. Sometimes they make mistakes, sometimes there's discrepancies. If you are subject, you have to go home for 2 years, or you have to get a waiver before getting a new visa and returning to the United States. There's various types of waivers. They can be based on a no objection statement from the embassy of your home country in Washington, D.C., or if you're going to work for NASA at Moffett Field, maybe they'll write an interested government agency waiver basis for you. There's others based on asylum or extreme hardship for a U.S. citizen relative. If you're on a Fulbright scholarship, nearly impossible to get your 2-year residence requirement waived. So for folks subject to 212E who don't have the time to get it waived, the two options you're going to want to think about are the O1 visa for extraordinary ability, which I'll talk about a lot, as well as the E2 visa for investment. Because you can, and the TN for Canadians, you can potentially get those even if you are subject.
I wonder if the G also does that, working with a recognized international organization. I think it might too.
What also does it?
The G4, the G category.
Yes. Oh, yes. G visas for NATO workers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of random ones. So this is why this is always an individual process. This is broad strokes outline content that I'm giving you today. Okay, so now for some latest updates, and I know, Rolando, these have probably kept you very busy. Maybe they've been exciting for you. One that I've been thrilled about recently is the improvements to STEM that the Biden-Harris administration released at the end of January. So the biggest thing is that all of these fields can now qualify as STEM degrees. So I don't know, how is Stanford approaching this, Rolando?
We've done some outreach specifically to some students that we thought might qualify for this, but there's some fields in here that I mean, those students are already in them and they already have zip codes that are STEM based. But what I didn't like about this was that they still stick to the rule that it cannot exceed, the period of academic training cannot exceed the length of time of their studies. So we thought, oh, great. You're doing a 2-year program, you get your 18 months of academic training, then they're saying you're going to get another 18, but that's not the way it works. And we had tried getting clarification. I'm still waiting for an email I wrote over 2 weeks ago to the people back in DC.
Okay.
We're doing workshops on these topics.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Well, we're not going to spend too much time on it. The one as a fuzzy that I am particularly excited about is social sciences with research methodology and quantitative methods. So that could be exciting for all the fuzzies out there. Another recent update in the administration is that many types of work visa interviews are being waived. So if you're currently being put in the H-1B lottery by an employer, it might be possible that you will apply for your passport by mail, your visa and your passport by mail this summer from a foreign country if you choose consular processing. So just make sure if your company is getting you a work visa that you're in touch with the company attorneys, you clear any travel plans with them before you leave the United States, and that you get their guidance on the latest of how you are going to be applying for a visa in another country. Now we're going to talk about the various non-immigrant visa options in the United States after you graduate or leave Stanford. And then we'll be talking about the green card options. And I'll share a link at the end for everybody to get this chart. So the H-1B I just alluded to, it's a biggie. The lottery is happening right now. So high level overview, if you're getting a job from a company, they should be putting you in the H-1B lottery right now, even if your graduation date is in June or in September.
Right, it's either going to be June 12th for spring quarter or late September. I want to say September 28th for the summer.
Okay, great. So the H-1B start date can be up to 6 months in advance. So they can request an October start date for you. And as long as you graduate before then, you should be able to do a change of status in the United States. If you are trying to qualify for the master's advanced degree lottery cap selection, you need to show your higher degree diploma before the petition is filed with USCIS. So if you're getting your master's degree in June, then you can be in the master's cap, but your attorney will have to file your H-1B petition at the last minute as soon as you can get proof of your graduation from Stanford. So that is something to keep in mind. Generally, H-1Bs are good for up to 6 years. If you're from India or China, you need to make sure that your company is also going to start the green card process for you soon. There's certain milestones before the end of the 6th year that you need to meet in order to get unlimited H-1B extensions beyond the 6 years. So here's the timeline based on the current lottery system. They made it electronic a few years ago, and this is what we're looking at now. We're in the initial registration period. I believe it actually ends March 18th. And then we should know everybody who's been initially selected before April 1st. Last year, we had additional lotteries in July, August, and November because the government was trying to use up all the available H-1B slots. And at that point, they could see how many people failed to apply or how many denials there were, and they could reuse the extra numbers for more people. So most people are going to be selected by April 1st. Most people will have 90 days to prepare and submit your petition. There might be requests for evidence during the summer, and your earliest possible start date is going to be October 1st. So now I want to spend a brief moment talking about cap gap. If you are in the final year of your OPT and you can't apply for STEM OPT, or if your STEM OPT is going to expire sometime before October 1st, you have to make sure that your company's immigration lawyer files your H-1B petition for you before the end of your work permit, not your F1 grace period after your work permit, but the last day of work authorized on your work permit. If they do that, then you get cap gap. You can keep living and working in the United States until October 1st when your status switches over to H-1B through a change of status.
My office can issue an I-20 that reflects the cap gap notation.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Amazing. So sometimes, and I don't know that this would apply too much for Stanford students, but like last year I had a Berkeley grad whose EAD work permit for regular OPT, that's all she was eligible for. It was expiring May 15th. So she got selected April 1st. We had to be ready to expedite and file the H-1B change of status by April 15th.
Berkeley graduates its students much earlier than Stanford. Yeah. They graduate in May. We graduate relatively late compared to everybody else.
Yeah. So you just want to make sure you stay on top of all of your expiration dates and deadlines. Don't let anything slip through the cracks. Know your OPT expiration date, know your STEM OPT expiration date. You have to manage this yourself. And there are resources to support you, but you have to take responsibility for your own expiration dates.
Do you like this system better than it was, say, 3-4 years ago?
Oh, yeah. Well, it used to be the H-1B season for us was like 2-3 months out of the year where we would go crazy and there were stacks of paper around the office and stuff. And now with this electronic system, it means that H-1B season is all year round. So there's kind of no break, but it definitely saved a lot of trees because There aren't, 140,000 extra stacks of 50 to 200 pages of paper that are being submitted to the government. And it makes the whole process a lot more accessible for small and early stage companies and startups, because the pay to play, the cost of admission is much lower. You don't have to pay all the filing fees and hire a lawyer to do the whole thing. You can pay $10, get each person registered, and then see if they were accepted and if you're going to follow through with the whole thing.
How many people do they, remember that there was like 200,000, 250,000?
Yeah, it's like that. I don't know. Somebody was saying they're expecting 300,000 this year. I don't know. But there's 85,000 available H-1Bs every year, and 20,000 of those are set aside for people with masters and PhDs from US institutions.
I didn't know the numbers were going to be that high. Wow.
So we're going to be talking about a lot of alternatives. I do want to mention one thing. This is particularly relevant in COVID and for people born in India and China. I still don't really advise international travel because it's tricky and the consulates are really inundated and appointments still get canceled and rescheduled arbitrarily, or maybe there's long wait times. So if you can stay in the United States and don't leave, that could be best. But if you're from China or India, because there's such long green card backlogs, I do see some students use the strategy of applying for consular processing, getting the petition approved, but never leaving to activate it, and staying in the US on OPT and STEM OPT until the end, and only going to India or China or wherever to get an H-1B visa interview and activate the H-1B when they need to change jobs or when they're sure their employer is ready to start the green card process. And that's a way to utilize all of your OPT time and buy yourself more time to have an employer sponsor you for a green card. So keep that in mind. Okay, now, what if you don't get selected in the H-1B lottery? Well, I have a lot of visa options for you, but if it's your last year of OPT and you have no other choice and you're not qualified for an O visa or something else, I want all of you to remember this concept to educate your future employers on how they can sponsor you for an H-1B without the lottery at any time of year. There's a nonprofit. We have a collaboration with them. They're in Boston. It's called Open Avenues. We're going to do a webinar with them in April on what to do if you weren't selected for the H-1B lottery. They would love to have Stanford students in their program as Global Talent Fellows. Here's the order of operations. You'd have a company willing to sponsor you. They nominate you to the nonprofit to participate as a Global Talent Fellow. The company pays the nonprofit. If the nonprofit accepts you as a Global Talent Fellow, the nonprofit will employ you and sponsor your H-1B. Because this nonprofit is A, a nonprofit, and B, affiliated with institutions of higher learning, all of their employees, like Stanford H-1B employees, would not have to go through the H-1B lottery. They can get unlimited H-1Bs any time of year. So they would sponsor you for a 5-hour-a-week job where you would do projects for your company with a group of underserved, diverse US college students at various community colleges or state colleges that need access to STEM project-based learning. So you do that for 5 hours a week, working with the students on micro internships or group projects on stuff for your company. You get an H-1B, and then your company can file a second concurrent H-1B so that you can work the other 35 hours a week legally at your company. So this is more expensive than the H-1B. It's lottery. It's more expensive than an O-1, but if you're at the very end of your OPT with no other options remaining, this has saved a lot of people in the last year since it got launched. So I'm really excited that this exists. But there are further alternatives. You do not have to remain in H-1B land, especially if you want to be a startup founder. H-1Bs are tricky because the required salary is high. You're not allowed to be self-employed. You have to be in a professional specialty occupation. So H-1Bs for founders can be done if you get an H-1B and you want to transfer it one day. But now we're going to talk a little bit about the alternatives. So first of all, if you're from Canada, Mexico, Chile, Singapore, or Australia, you guys get unlimited work visas. The TNs are category job specific, so pay attention to that list when you're considering what jobs to apply for. But you guys get special options, so congratulations, educate your employer about that. Now, we had some questions about the e-visas for people starting companies. So there are a series of treaties between the United States and different governments. Now, China and India are not on this list. Many Western and Eastern European countries are, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. It's all over the world. So if you have citizenship in one of these countries, if you are investing probably about $100,000 to $200,000 of your own money into a new US company that's at least 51% owned by citizens of these countries, you can get an investor visa. Sometimes our startup founders invest intellectual property where we can demonstrate the value of that IP instead of cash. There's another variation where if your US company is doing a lot of trade with your home country, you could get a trading visa. And you can also, if you have this established, you can bring over as many essential employees sharing your same citizenship or nationality as you want, even if they've never worked for your company before. So let's say you are from Japan, you're a Stanford student, you had some luck with your crypto investments, and now you have $200,000 of cash. You want to start a company in the United States after you graduate. You set it up with a co-founder. You have 60%, your US co-founder has 40%. And now you want to get visas for your friends from Japan who are also software engineers to come work at your US company. They would be able to qualify. So that's the E, and it's great for normal businesses. It can get maxed out for startups that are rapidly scaling because in each funding round every 18 months, your equity will dilute further and further. And in the Japan example, if those founders then raised around from Andreessen Horowitz and their equity diluted, and now the CEO had 46% and the co-founder had 27% and the VCs got the rest, now that company would no longer be at least 51% Japan owned, so they wouldn't be able to qualify anymore. So you just have to be able to track that. Now, another option, speaking of companies, just real lightly, the L transfer visa. Sometimes MBA students have been working at a big international consulting company and now they're doing the MBA, and after they graduate, they want to be rehired by that company in the United States. Well, the L could work. Or if you go back home and work for a company and then you want to transfer to a US office in the future, the L could work. The government was very strict on these in the Trump administration, but they're getting, the approvals are coming more easily in recent months. So I would consider it an option for small companies again. Now, I've been talking, if you follow my work, I've been really excited about International Entrepreneur Parole. This is a new option for startup founders. And you can be from any country. It allows you to build your company for 2.5 years. You can renew it for 2.5 years. Your spouse can get a work permit. It's not a real visa. It was created by regulation, so it's called parole instead. I bet a lot of students can and will qualify. You need a US company, less than 5 years old. You have to own at least 10%. You've got to be a founder. If you've raised at least, call it $265,000 from VCs in the US in the last 18 months, you could qualify. It sounds too good to be true. Well, it's amazing. And this program had a long past, but essentially got reactivated last spring by the Biden administration. But the challenge our clients have been having, because we had a bunch of people apply last summer, the government still hasn't decided their petitions. And we're going on like 6 to 9 months for several of these cases. And we can't do a change of status for people in the United States. So consider this, but just know that it's probably going to take a year unless we can apply with the blessing of a congressperson, a senator, an interested government agency, so that we can justify an expedite request. Now, like if you invented flying shoes and DARPA is going to write a letter and they just funded you with the Stanford connections, we could probably get this through pretty quickly. It's definitely easier than an O1, but it's just new legal territory. The government is still figuring out what they're doing, and they have not yet approved anybody. Now, I mentioned with the STEM degrees and the OPT that things were getting easier. It's also easier to get an O1 for extraordinary ability for both people in STEM and entrepreneurs. So if anybody is ever possibly eligible for an O1, this is my favorite type of visa to get people these days. There's no minimum salary. You can have an itinerary of work with multiple gigs. You don't have to just commit to one employer. So if you want to be a founder and an advisor and a consultant and trade crypto and do whatever, we can build that all in, and it's all legal. CEOs can get it. We can have somebody else be an agent for the signatory. So the O is really, really, really good. You can have it for 3 years. It's indefinitely extendable. One drawback is your spouse cannot get a work permit. So if you're married, that can be a challenge. But another advantage is that it's a really wonderful stepping stone to getting yourself a green card and not needing a company to get you a green card. So often the best and brightest option, often the best option for academics and founders, the best and brightest. And there's another variation for artists. So like in tech companies, we see a lot of UX UI designers getting it. And there are these 8 criteria, and you have to show at least 3 of them. Prizes, awards, membership, publicity about you, judging competitions, showing what you contributed to your industry, being the author of publications, having a leading or critical role, and earning a lot of money. You only need 3 of these to qualify. And we had a recent podcast. I'll try to put a link in the chat window during the Q&A, but it recently, and unfortunately, I do have a hard stop at the hour, so I'll do what I can to go quickly. Basically, O1s got easier. You can use Stanford awards, PhD awards, postdoc awards, grants. Those can now qualify before they couldn't. So that is very exciting. Membership in professional associations can count for one of the criteria. If your video went viral on YouTube, that can now count for some of the criteria. If you review abstracts or papers for peer-reviewed journals, that can count. But if you judge a hackathon or a startup pitch competition, that can also count. If you invented something, great. If you created a new type of business, great. But they will even consider pending patents now. It does not have to be fully awarded. Also wonderful for STEM students, you don't have to be the first author on publications anymore. You don't even need citations. And you can publish in professional journals, and we show the circulation and the audience. Founders of venture-funded companies can now qualify for critical and distinguished roles, so that's fabulous. And we can even use safe notes and other convertible notes to prove high valuation in a company, showing remuneration that you've earned that's high. So AOs are getting so much easier for people. It is very exciting. You don't have to wait to the end of your OPT or STEM OPT. And if you want to explore if this is an option for you, we will, if you reach out to us, we have a questionnaire that you can fill out and we'll evaluate if you might qualify. We also have a class. If you heard that list and you're like, oh, there's no way I have 3, we do have a class for Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp, which we can send a link to as well. Now, green cards, there are many green card options. There's the main working green card options, but the two I really want to focus on are Extraordinary Ability, EB-1A, and National Interest Waiver, EB-2. And there's also marriage. So if you're actually in love with a US citizen and you have a good faith marriage and you share money and you love each other and your families know each other and your friends know each other, you don't have to take pride in your accomplishments. Just get a green card through your marriage. It's faster. But never marry your friend for a green card, even if they're nice and they're doing it for free. That is immigration fraud, and you don't want to mess around with that. So please be very careful with this. But there are ways for you to get a green card on your own without getting married. So if you get an O1 and you're from India or China, then you're going to want to focus on the EB-1 for Extraordinary Ability. It's a little bit harder, but it's the fastest way for you to bypass all the crazy wait times and get a green card. And otherwise, for anybody else, I would highly encourage you to get an EB-2 National Interest Waiver green card. It just got easier to do it. Once again, new Biden policy announcement. And the reason that it exists is you're showing in the future that you are going to be a benefit to the United States. You can file with a master's degree. You don't even have to have one. It's easier to get than an O1A. You don't need a job offer, and you can self-petition, and your spouse and children can get green cards as well. So they specifically tailored the new guidance to make it easier for people with STEM degrees and entrepreneurs to self-petition. They're looking at whether you're going to enhance the societal welfare, the culture or artistry of the United States, if you're going to advance valuable technology, or if you're going to promote research in a field of study. They want to see that you have the experience to do it. Certainly your Stanford degree will be part of it. You could include a business plan. You could show past research. You could show customer usage data, investment. There's lots of ways to do it. It's very free form. And we want to show that on balance, you're going to be good for the United States, that there's not really somebody to replace you. And we can show this by, oh, your technology saves lives, or, oh, you're going to create jobs for Americans, or, you know, something like that. So this is a wonderful way. You don't even have to have graduated if you want to consider starting this process, but we do want to be careful about travel plans, immigrant intent, and keeping in mind that the F1 and J1 are non-immigrant options. So we have to be very careful about the timing. So if you're considering embarking on an immigration journey, we help startup founders, we help people at tech startups, we help families. We're more than happy to chat with you and let you know your options. I would just encourage everybody, the biggest pain point I see for people who have tried to do the process with other law firms and come to us and ask for a second opinion is they are very frustrated by, I don't know if they still call it like the Stanford duck syndrome, but it's basically imposter syndrome and procrastination. Absolutely. Like most lawyers aren't good project managers, and most highly accomplished people can procrastinate because they're worried that they're not good enough. And so that combination can make some of these things hard to apply for. So if you do this, it's not just the money, but it's also your time, your energy. We try to project manage the process as much as possible, but you may want to bring in other accountability partners into your life to make sure that you are not freaking out and procrastinating, and providing all the requested information as soon as possible to your law firm to make it easier to help you. I started a nonprofit in the pandemic. It's called the Community for Global Innovation. We are offering unpaid internships to international students and other volunteers in the summer. Our mission is to connect international students in the United States with free one-on-one legal advice consultations with qualified immigration attorneys who want to give back, because we know you need help, and we want to create a network to be able to do that more broadly. So would love any requests for volunteering there. And if you need help, you can email us at hello@alcorn.law. And let me, Rolando, can I take, is it okay if I go through some of these questions?
Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, thank you. So we got the question about the waiver process for the J1 residency requirement. You need to identify A, are you subject, and then B, what's your best option for getting the waiver. And then, you know, I would advise that students work with attorneys to go through the waiver process, because sometimes things can slip through the cracks with the embassy or the State Department or USCIS. So we want to make sure that happens in a timely manner. Oh, here's another question. I'm in the US on F1. How long should I hold on to my IRS tax records and returns if I were to apply for permanent residency or another visa in the future? Well, in the green card interview, I've seen them ask for 5 years of tax returns. In the citizenship interview, they have a question of, have you ever filed a US tax return as a non-resident since becoming a resident? So I'm not a tax advisor. I don't know the actual answer here, but I would say that you should always have at least access to scans of all your US tax records for your whole life in case you're ever asked. We covered entrepreneurship as an international student. Another one of my projects, dreams that I'm creating is we need a way for international students to actually test out and iterate on their tech startups before OPT, legally, maybe with CPT during the summers before they graduate. So creating some sort of mechanism for international student founders to get funded and have work authorization to pursue those dreams. So that might be something to talk more about, Rolando. We have another question about international couples. We've got 2 humanities PhDs, and they are looking to each get visas, but they want to know how to navigate their transition from an F1 into permanent residency. You can keep your non-immigrant visas separate. Like if one of you gets a cap exempt H-1B to do research at a university and the other one gets an O-1 to work at a startup, that's fine. And then whoever starts the green card process first, just include the other spouse and any kids as your dependents in your green card process. But you don't have to have a dependent spousal work visa. You can both have separate work visas. Visa green card pathway for a PhD wanting to have an academic career, PhD, postdoc to becoming faculty. Many universities offer wonderful immigration sponsorship options. I would advise that you talk to them at your postdoc interviews and your faculty interviews about that. But the way to really take this into your own hands is just start your EB-1A or EB-2 NIW green card self-petition during your OPT even, or even gather documents before you start graduating so that you can just uncouple your immigration from finding a job and you'll have more autonomy that way. Here's another student graduating in June, found a full-time job. Employer will sponsor them for the H-1B only next year, not now. That is common for big companies. I'm sorry to hear that. If you found another job offer in the next week, they could potentially also put you in the lottery, but then you would need to commit to working there in October if you get selected and if they file for you. Can the diversity lottery be applied for by F1 students since it might show dual intent? This is a wonderful question. It's a gray area. I have seen students do it, but Rolando, have you ever heard of any stories where F1 student applied in the lottery for a green card, went home to renew their F1 and got denied for immigrant intent?
No.
Okay.
Haven't,
Great.
but that's all. But that is a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you do a change of status from F1 to J1? Yes, it is theoretically possible. The change of status times can take 6 to 12 months. It might behoove you to consider doing a consular visa and interview in that case.
Yeah, if they go from F1 to a J scholar,
Yeah,
it's highly suggest that they go home and do the change of status that way.
excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Somebody wanted to know the investment. We typically charge $300 for consultation, and most self-petition work visas and green cards from immigration lawyers in general could be anywhere from $4,000 to $15,000 for a single person. It's usually done on a flat fee basis. We usually charge hourly if there's a request for evidence. So keep that in mind. What is the earliest and latest someone on F1 can apply for an O1? Well, you can apply anytime. And then the thing to talk to Rolando about would be, if I'm on O1, can I still be enrolled as a student in my Stanford program?
Yeah, I've heard that the answer is yes. Stanford says you need to be in legal status. You know, we prefer you to be in legal status when you're attending Stanford. And there's a multitude of visas out there that permit someone to study, but you also have to talk to the company. Will you let me attend school? Am I honoring the intent of the O1 also? That might be.
Okay, excellent. And if somebody has a prior to 212E J1 home country residence requirement, it does not prevent you from applying for an O1, but you do have to consular process to get your O1 visa. You cannot do a change of status. See if I can take a few more. Could a change of status from a F1 to a J1 affect negatively an application for a green card in the future? No, that would be fine. Somebody wants to know more about changing from F1 to J1 if they go home to a visa interview. What's a good reason to request it so it's not denied?
Yeah, the reason a lot of people change to J1 because they want their spouse to work, the J2.
Okay.
You say during the interview, I would love for my spouse to work. You're going to be denied the J1 and the J2. So, and the J1, there's at least 13 categories of the Js, depending how you count. And so, I don't know if you're talking about J1 student category. You wouldn't be able to do that. We would talk you out of trying to do that within the US, going from F1 student, J1 student, because high probability, it'll probably be denied and it'll probably take forever within the US to try to do a change of status. So what's a good reason? That's a hard question. I mean,
furtherance of science.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And study, you know, in the US, that's, you know, plus. F2 technically can't study full-time, you know. Anyway.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have questions for. This webinar is recorded. We will be emailing out a link as well as additional links if you have further questions. Remember, F1, J1 questions have to go to Bechtel. We can't answer those. And anything else we would be more than happy to chat about. Rolando, thank you so much for inviting me to do this here today. I really appreciate it.
I enjoy these. I thank you again. Those of you that have questions about J1, F1, you can email international students at stanford.edu. But if you are a scholar, we're doing the student side. The scholars have their own email. If there are questions about being a scholar at Stanford, and that email is internationalscholars@stanford.edu. They won't answer questions about going somewhere else, getting a J1 from some other place. Again, we have workshops coming up. Check our workshop section there. Mario's doing quite a few sessions on interesting topics, including the STEM stuff and, you know, doing your own startup on an F1 OPT. We prefer you definitely to be on OPT, which doesn't have issues about being self-employed. But all these other things that you heard about Sophie speak today, you definitely need help from an attorney. Do not talk to your
Do not DIY this. Do not base it on Reddit discussions.
Like surgery on yourself. You know, you really need to have an expert help you with, with
Yeah.
these different visa categories that exist out there, but there's so many. And by the way, I noticed how big your law firm has gotten since the last time.
Yeah, we've been busy.
Yeah, who are all these other people? That's
Well, thank you so much, Rolando. And thank you to everybody who was here in the audience today. With that, I'm going to close. Thank you so much.
all righty.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.